want to go back and look at it, then they can as well.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, so Anita, I'll hand over to you. The floor is now yours.
Thank you very much. So what I'm going to do now is, hopefully this will work. Let me just see, just clicking on various things here and get rid of that. Slideshow. Okay, it should just be coming through. Great. Okay, so can you see has the full screen come up now, James? Okay, brilliant. So I shall carry on. Well, first of all, thank you very much, James, for inviting me and for organising the session. And thank you to all the wonderful triathletes. So thank you for joining me on a Saturday. So hopefully by now in your triathlon career, you're aware of the importance of proper fueling. So clearly proper fueling and getting your training nutrition right is really important. It does play a really big part in your performance and your recovery. But with this huge array of sports nutrition products that's out there and all the information that you're seeing on the internet and probably things that you see on social media and listen to your friends, deciding what to eat and drink can sometimes feel rather overwhelming. So my aim in this talk is to give you some clear and evidence-based advice that will help you to build a balanced diet and support all your training goals and your race goals. So in the next 30 minutes, I'll be answering the following questions and giving you some simple and practical guidance on how to fuel your triathlon training. So we'll be looking at what's the optimal diet for performance, how to fuel for your training, and how to plan your diet. What should you be eating before and during your training? What should you be drinking around training? And finally, what should you be eating for recovery? Now, if there are any questions that pop into your head throughout the session, then please just jot them down in the chat box and then we'll have time at the end to go through them. Okay, so I'm just going to highlight this statement, which came from it's just the latest nutrition guidance for athletes. It was a report that was jointly published in 2016 by the ACSM, that's the American College of Sports Medicine, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, which is really the largest dietetic association in the world. So I've got the reference there, but simply to highlight one key statement, and that is that the performance of and recovery from sporting activities are enhanced by well-chosen nutrition strategies. So in other words, nutrition will make a really big difference. So it's really important you take on board the right amount of nutrients at the right times, and this will help you to stay healthy and reduce your risk of illness. And this is perhaps the most important thing, as good health underpins good performance. And it also means that you'll have fewer missed training sessions. It means that you'll be able to fuel your training sessions and be able to train harder, which in turn means bigger endurance and strength gains. It means that you'll experience less fatigue and muscle damage following training, that you'll be able to promote better recovery and faster recovery and adaptation from training. So in other words, a well-planned diet will help you to get more out of your training and to perform to your full potential. So what should you be eating? Well, there is no single best or magic diet for athletes. Your main aim always should be to eat the right amount of fuel that will support your training and to have a good balance of nutrients. So I've devised this visual guide. It's called the Athlete's Plate, and it's based on the latest sports nutrition guidance. And it explains the amount of different food groups that you need, not only for optimal health, but also for performance. So as you'll see in front of you, it divides food into four main groups. So you've got your fruit and veg, you've got your protein-rich foods, and these also include the calcium-rich foods. It also includes carbohydrate and healthy fats. So the segments that you'll see in front of you, this really relates to, I suppose, an average or a typical training day. However, this will change. So the 3 slides following, you'll see how this changes depending on the type, the intensity and the duration that you're doing each day. So just to give you a very, very, very brief summary of what the guidance is for each of these food groups. So you'll see fruit and veg. We've all heard of the 5-a-day campaign. That's the PHE advice. That's for the general population. But we do know that athletes need more vitamins and minerals. So by scaling up towards 10 portions a day, that will offer you additional health and performance benefits. So a portion, just in case you're wondering, is equivalent to 80 grams of any fresh or frozen fruit or vegetables. So that would be equivalent to a small apple, it would be equivalent to a carrot or 3 broccoli florets or 6 strawberries. So it's roughly the amount that you could comfortably fit into the palm of your hand. Now, if you look downwards at protein-rich foods, these also include calcium-rich foods. These include pulses like beans and lentils, so plant proteins, as well as animal proteins like meat, fish and poultry, and soya products such as tofu as well. So we know from all the research that athletes need more protein compared to the general population. So the guidance for those of you who like to get a bit more technical and a bit more detailed about your diet is between 1.2 and 2 grams per kilogram body weight each day. So let's say you weigh 60 kilos, then your needs will be between 72 and 120 grams per day. But within all this, you should always ensure that you're including at least 2 portions of calcium-rich foods a day. So these include your milk, cheese and yogurt, as well as tofu, or a fortified plant milk if you're vegan. So with carbohydrates, so these include all the different types of grains. That includes bread, pasta, rice and oats and potatoes. Now there's no minimum requirement, but really the amount you need to take each day will depend on the intensity and the duration of your planned training. So essentially, the higher the intensity and the longer the duration of your activity, more carbohydrate you'll need. And we'll come back to that in just a moment. So a lot more detail on that in just a moment. So the healthy fats, well, these include your nuts, seeds, avocados, and olive and rapeseed oil. And the guidance is simply to include at least 1 food from each of this group at each meal. Now, the beauty of this athlete's plate is that it can be adapted to meet the different fuel demands of your training sessions. So, for example, on easy training days or recovery days, your fuel and carbohydrate needs will be relatively low. So to ensure that you're getting all the right nutrients that you need, you should aim for roughly half of your plate to be made up of fruit and vegetables, about 1/4 to be made up of proteins, and about 1/4 to be made up of carbohydrates. Now, if you are doing moderate training, by which I mean, say you're training either at a moderate high intensity for 1 to 2 hours each day, then your fuel and carbohydrate needs will be higher than on your easy training days. So first of all, you need a bigger plate, in other words, bigger portions of everything. And you definitely need to eat more carbohydrate-rich foods. So today, you would divide your plate into thirds, and you should aim to have roughly 1/3 of your meal plate made up of carbs, roughly 1/3 protein-rich foods, and roughly 1/3 would be your fruit and veg. But if you're doing hard training, so these are days when you're training or perhaps racing for longer than 2 hours, and clearly your fuel and carbohydrate needs will be higher still. So you'll definitely need to change the proportions of food in your diet. And this will allow you to maintain your muscle glycogen stores and to sustain your training and prevent early fatigue. So on these days, you should aim to have roughly 1/2 of your meal plate made up of carbs, roughly 1/4 protein, and roughly 1/4 fruit and veg. So let's put all this into practice, into real life, into actual foods. So what are the differences between an athlete and a couch potato? So obviously, clearly there's a big lifestyle difference, but in terms of nutrition, the main differences actually relate to everything. You'll need more energy, in other words, more fuel. You'll need more carbohydrate. You'll need more protein, and you'll need more vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. So the simple answer is that you'll just really need more of everything, but clearly it's the proportions and the amounts that you really need to pay attention to. So essentially, I've just put here the contrast to give you an idea of the amount difference between a couch potato and an athlete's plate. So clearly there is a size difference. So let's look a little bit more closely at your fuel needs, about your energy needs. So we know that most forms of training will burn between 300 and 500 calories per hour. Obviously, it will depend on the type and intensity that you're training, but it's not a license to eat whatever you want. So you might have built up a calorie debt during training, but you still need to match your energy intake and your energy output. And if you fail to eat enough, in other words, you underfuel day after day, then this will have a serious effect on both your health and performance, and you'll experience poor recovery. You'll experience persistent fatigue, struggling to recover, underperformance, and you will increase your risk of illnesses and infections. So what could be the early warning signs that you might be underfueling? So I'm now going to put in front of you a list of potential symptoms. So any of these could be an early indicator that you're not eating enough. So females, the most obvious symptom that we'd experience would be either irregular or missed periods. And clearly, if periods have gone completely, that is a sign that it's your body's response to a hormonal imbalance, and that could reflect your nutrition status. If you're experiencing persistent fatigue, maybe you're feeling generally very unmotivated to do daily tasks. If you're experiencing either a drop in your performance, or perhaps you're struggling to hit your PBs. In other words, you're underperforming relative to the training load that you're undertaking. If you're really struggling to recover after your workouts day after day, if you're experiencing recurrent illnesses and injuries, perhaps for 3 months or more, maybe you're experiencing stress fractures, or you're perhaps experiencing changes in mood, such as you're feeling more anxious or irritable, or perhaps you are, sleep is disrupted. So any of those symptoms would be the early warning signs. But clearly prevention is a lot better than cure. So if you can prevent underfueling in the first place, then you stand a much better chance of achieving your optimal training potential. So your aim at all times is to match your energy intake to your training load. And the best advice that I can give you is to ensure that you are using that athlete's plate so it becomes bigger on your hard training days. You eat more on your hard training days. Make sure that you eat before exercising. So you're not always exercising on empty, especially if you are doing high intensity sessions or you're doing long workouts. Now, for long workouts, particularly if they're 90 minutes or more, then eating or taking on board fuel during that time will help. And then prioritize recovery. So if you are, sorry, I'll say that again. So it's really important that you prioritize recovery and you eat either a snack or a meal straight after exercise. Okay, so let's go back to carbohydrates. I'll give you just a little bit more detail here. So it is a major fuel for exercise, but a lot of people are unsure how much to eat. So here's what you need to remember. So firstly, carbohydrate is a fuel for your brain, and it's also the preferred fuel for your muscles. So during exercise, you are burning a mixture of carbohydrate and fat, But what's really important to remember is that carbohydrate is a more efficient fuel than fat. So in other words, it provides you with more energy per volume oxygen consumed, and it also produces energy faster than fats. So you definitely need it to fuel high intensity exercise. But unfortunately, we've only got a limited storage of carbohydrate. We can only store about 500 grams in our muscles and our liver as glycogen, and that's enough to fuel you for only about 2 hours of hard, I don't know, I put swimming or running or cycling. At which point you would be experiencing fatigue and no longer able to maintain your pace. So essentially, your requirements will depend on your exercise intensity and duration, as well as your individual fitness levels. So the longer and harder you train, the more carbohydrate you will need. So what happens when carbohydrate runs low? Well, a low carbohydrate availability or glycogen levels means that you will have a limited capacity for high intensity training. So if your glycogen stores are depleted or you've got low blood sugar levels, then you can no longer maintain the required work output. It means that fatigue will develop, and at this point endurance drops, and this means that you will obviously underperform, so suboptimal performance. And if you fail to replenish your glycogen stores after training, session after session, then your recovery will be slower, and over time your immune function will decrease and you'll become more susceptible to illness and infection. So here's a quick reminder of carbohydrate sources. So you'll see it's again mostly grains such as oats, pasta, bread, rice noodles, all sorts of other grains, couscous, as well as potatoes and sweet potatoes, beans, lentils, we call them beans, lentils, chickpeas, they're all pulses, and fruit, all types of fruits. So a portion is roughly the amount that will cover 1/3 of your plate. So those of you who like to go into more detail, perhaps you might want to be sort of checking the amounts that you're consuming, then here's the official guide, here's the current carbohydrate guidelines for performance. So as you'll see in front of you, the amount of carbohydrate that you need will really depend on your body weight and also the intensity and duration of training that you do. In other words, you're training low. So for example, if you look at the top left-hand side, if you're doing very light training, then your carb needs will be much lower, only about 3 to 5 grams of carbs per kilogram of your body weight. But if you're doing very hard training, so that's the bottom right-hand side, so you're training for 4 hours or more, which some of you may be doing on a camp perhaps, then your needs will be extremely high, up to 12 grams per kilogram body weight. But in reality, most of you are probably around the top right-hand box, so that's the moderate training, round about 5 to 7 grams. So that means if you weigh 60 kilos, you'll probably need around 300 grams of carbohydrate each day. Okay, so this slide shows you the main sources of protein in your diet, and obviously this is critical for triathletes to facilitate not only muscle growth, but also repair after your workout sessions. So animal proteins would include your meat and fish, poultry, eggs and dairy, but also plant proteins offer many additional benefits. So we're talking about the pulses, we're talking about nuts and seeds, and soya products such as tofu and soya milk. So plant proteins will provide not just protein, but also other nutrients like fiber and phytonutrients of plant nutrients that are beneficial for performance and for improving your gut health. And we now know that gut health is really critical in terms of health and performance. So the ideal amount of protein per meal, we know from the research, should be between 15 and 25 grams, and a portion is roughly the amount you'd fit on your palm, or equivalent to approximately 1/3 of your plate, depending really on how much training you're doing that day. So we know that you need more vitamins and minerals. We've already covered, the basic guidance is 5 a day, but getting up towards 10 would make you, would help to optimize your performance. And portion is about 8. That's equivalent to a small apple or orange, or a carrot, or 3 broccoli florets. But perhaps one of the most important things that you can remember is to eat a rainbow of colours. So that's because each type of fruit or vegetable contains an array of phytonutrients and antioxidants that are responsible for its colour, and they all have different health benefits and functions in the body. So the wider the variety you can consume, the better health you will enjoy. Okay, so meal timing. What should you be eating and drinking before, during and after exercise? So let's consider first of all what you should be eating before exercise. We certainly know that good nutrition should begin before you start training, and if you want, and also that you should aim to start exercise with plenty of energy and be well hydrated. So ideally try to schedule a pre-exercise meal so that you've got a 2 to 4 hour gap eating and exercising. But if you've got less than 2 hours before your workout, so say you're going from school or college straight to a training session, then, and you haven't got the 2 hours, then you could have a pre-exercise snack about 30 to 60 minutes beforehand. Now, a lot of you will like to train first thing in the morning, maybe at weekends, and if that's you, then you've got 2 options. So firstly, if you're planning a high intensity session, then you should have a pre-training snack about 30 to 60 minutes beforehand, and that will help to raise blood glucose levels. But you can train fast. It's possible for you to train fast first thing, but that's only if you're doing a low intensity session of an hour or less, because clearly you will have less glycogen, less carbohydrate available. And if you are doing a high intensity workout, then that will require more fuel. So here are some examples of suitable breakfasts for before, say you're doing an early morning session and you want to consume something 30 to 60 minutes beforehand. So clearly it'll be a smaller volume, but it will be high in carbohydrates. So there's a few examples on the screen in front of you. We've got peanut butter on toast, but actually honey on toast would also be perfectly all right. It's high carbohydrate. I've put in here sort of these porridge pots. So those of you who would need to travel to training, these are really handy. You simply just add your boiling water, and you can even consume them in the car, provided you're not driving, of course. I used to use those all the time. So I had a 30-minute commute when I took both of my daughters down to the pool at 5:30 in the morning. So that was their first choice, and it would literally just give them sufficient carbohydrate for their sessions. Bananas are also good. Oat bars are also good first thing in the morning. But if you're not training first thing, you can have something more substantial. And these breakfasts now that I'm going to show you in the next couple of slides would be suitable really for any day of the week. So either after training or simply as a breakfast before school. So porridge with banana and nuts, or you could have granola with fruit and yogurt. So the idea is that you're building that healthy athlete's plate. You've got the carbs in there, so in this case you've got the oats and the fruit. You've got your fruit and your veg portion in there. In this case it's strawberries, but any berries would be really, really good for athletes. And then the protein and calcium will come from yogurt and milk. Okay, so exactly what should you be eating before your main training sessions? Well, the best foods to eat before exercise really depend on your workout goals and on your individual preference. But to give you a good general guide, your pre-workout meal should be easy to digest. It should include carbohydrate-rich foods, in other words, your grains or your potatoes, with smaller amounts of protein and fat. But really the exact amount that you need to eat will really depend on the length and intensity of your workouts. So if you're doing longer workouts, they will require more carbohydrate fuel, as will high intensity workouts. So the following 3 slides, I'll give you some examples of suitable pre-exercise meals. So here we've got baked sweet potato. It could be a regular potato. I've added hummus with avocados, beetroot and rockets. So these are all foods that are particularly beneficial prior to high intensity exercise. For protein, we've added hummus, but you can substitute chicken or beans or fish. So here we've got a rice dish. So rice is really, really good before a workout. So I've made a risotto and I've added here some beans and peas for protein and some colourful vegetables. It can be butternut squash or any other veg that you want. And here we've got a noodle dish. So noodles and also pasta actually would be really good before exercise. So noodles, I've added here some colourful vegetables, some stir-fried vegetables. I've added crispy tofu, but you could substitute prawns or turkey if you prefer. And here are some examples of pre-exercise snacks. So we've got bananas, we've got yogurt, which you can mix in some fruit. We've got toast with peanut butter, or any kind of nut butter will be great. Some dry fruit and nuts, or you can have a bar. So it could be a sort of granola or oat type of bar, or a fruit and nut bar such as a Naked bar. That's probably the most well-known make, and they do a really good job at giving you just a small amount of carbohydrate and protein as well. So if you are exercising for less than an hour, you don't need extra fuel, and in fact water is all you'll need. But if you're exercising for longer than about 60 to 90 minutes, then your performance might be limited by the depletion of glycogen in your body. So consuming carbohydrate during exercise can help you to maintain your blood glucose for longer and delay fatigue by providing a quick source of energy to your muscles. So the advice is that you should start fueling approximately 45 to 60 minutes into your workout or your event, depending on your exercise intensity and your hunger. And then the key is to then refuel, or in other words, keep consuming carbohydrate little and often. So most athletes prefer to fuel after approximately, roughly every 30 minutes. But the exact timing will really depend on your personal preference. The optimal amount you need is food that will give you roughly 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour. And that again will depend on your exercise intensity or duration. So in front of you now, you'll see there's a variety of foods that you can choose from. So you can opt either for whole foods, like normal natural foods, or for sports nutrition products. So each of the following examples will give you approximately 30 grams of carbohydrate. And so remember, this is the optimal amount you should consume per hour. But if you're working at a higher intensity, you'll need 60 grams. So you'll get that from 500 mils of either squash or an isotonic sports drink, 2 small bananas or a very large banana, 2 small gels. Obviously you'll need to check the packet because that will vary from brand to brand. You can get it from 40 grams of dried fruits such as raisins, or 2 of these large medjool dates. There's a picture of them at the bottom of the screen. You could get that from 6 jelly babies. That's a cheap version, or if you want to spend lots of money, you can buy these energy chews, which are perfectly okay. They're just an expensive version of the same thing. You can have energy balls, which you either make yourself, which I would favour because it's much cheaper, or you can buy them, but they are expensive. Or you can have energy bars or oat bars or fruit and nut bars. But the most important thing is that you do experiment during training and you find out what works for you. So in a race situation, you've absolutely got your fuel plan sorted out. So how much do you be drinking? Well, the most important thing is to ensure that you are properly hydrated before you start training. So those of you who like to be very exact and go into details, this is the official sports nutrition guidance from the ACSM, so approximately 500 mils, that's a small water bottle, in the 4 hours prior to exercise, and then a smaller amount in the 45 minutes prior to exercise, literally just to quench your thirst. But don't drink too much right before a workout or right before a race, because guess what? That's just going to make you go to the loo about 10 minutes later, which is very annoying. But perhaps the best way to work out whether you are hydrated is what we call the urine check, or the P-test. So this looks a little bit like a Dulux paint chart. It literally means looking at the colour, the volume, and also the odour of your urine. So the optimal target is to be in that pale yellow zone. That means that you're well hydrated. If you are golden yellow or deep yellow, that would indicate that you're dehydrated and that you need to drink more. However, if you are in that dark brown zone, that would indicate a more serious degree of dehydration. And at that point, if you experience that during a race, you would have some sort of rehydration therapy or some kind of medical intervention, but hopefully you will never become like that. So how much should you be drinking during exercise? Well, there are no strict rules any longer. Once upon a time there were, but now the official advice from scientists is to drink to thirst. In other words, you listen to your body and you drink according to your sweat rate. Clearly your sweat rate is very individual. Some of you will be sweating more than others. So this will depend on temperature and humidity, on your speed, intensity and duration, and also on your body mass and surface area. But the key literally is to listen to your body, drink little and often, but during a race, again, those of you who like to be really precise, and perhaps as you get into higher up races, you may want to have a rough plan, a drinking plan, a hydration plan beforehand. And you can calculate your sweat losses during training. You simply weigh yourself before and after a workout, and that you know that each kilo that you've lost equates to approximately 1 litre of sweat. So your aim at all times is to avoid becoming dehydrated, as that will decrease your endurance and your performance, but you also need to avoid becoming overhydrated, and that's a condition that's called hyponatremia. It's not that common, but it's become increasingly common in some of the long distance triathlon events, particularly with adults. I'm not sure whether we've got any data with youth athletes at the moment, but that's when people are literally drinking far too much water. So what should you be drinking? Well, if you're exercising for less than 60 or 90 minutes, you simply need to hydrate. And the best way to achieve that is either by drinking water or by consuming just a very low carbohydrate drink. So either diluted squash or a sports drink, but not an isotonic sports drink, be one of these light sports drinks. But again, that's an expensive version of diluted squash. If you are exercising longer, in other words, your sweat losses are higher, then your aim is to maintain hydration as well as take on board fuel. So in these circumstances, both water and food would be appropriate, and you can get that from an isotonic sports drink, or you can make your own from squash and perhaps a pinch of salt if your sweat losses are particularly high. So in these circumstances, again, you've really got a choice of either water with food such as bananas or dried fruit or gels, or an isotonic drink. So recovery nutrition, well, this is really very important, because this is when your adaptation to training takes place. And there are 3 goals to your recovery. We also call them the 3 R's of recovery. So the exact amount, sorry, let me just, okay, so three R's of recovery. So that will be to rehydrate, that's the first R. The second R is to refuel. And the third R is to repair. So rehydrate, that means putting fluid back into your body. And really the exact amount of fluid that you consume, need to consume, will depend on your sweat losses. So if you have got an idea, if you fancy weighing yourself before and after exercise, just the occasional session, then if you've lost a kilo of weight, that means that you need to replace that with between 1.25 and 1.5 litres. Not all in one go, that would be fairly impossible and also ineffective. You should do that over a period of time, so over a period of 2 or 3 hours. So refueling, that means putting carbs back into your body. And we know that in this 2-hour window post-training, that is quite critical, particularly if you want to recover fast, if you've got another training session that day. So if you can replenish carbs during that time between 1 and 1.2 grams per kilogram body weight. So if you weigh 60 kilos, you'll need about 60 or so grams of carbohydrate. And then the third R stands for repair, and that means consuming protein after your workout, and that will help to repair the damage to your muscle cells and help to build new muscle as well. So the optimal amount is about 15 to 30 grams of protein per meal, but not just in your post-workout meal. Every meal should have roughly the same amount of protein, so you should equally distribute the protein throughout each day. So here are some examples of suitable recovery snacks and drinks. So drinks, first of all, we've got 500 mils of milk, or really anything based on milk, that will supply you with 20 grams of protein, the optimal amount of protein. So you can make the milkshake yourself, or you can buy flavoured, a lot of athletes like to buy these flavoured milks like Yazoo, but as I said, I think you can make your own much cheaper and it will be better for you. You can, of course, make your own recovery smoothie. You don't need to spend a lot of money doing that. So basically by blending together milk and either protein powder or a high protein yogurt, that's what I would favour actually, particularly for under 18 athletes. You add in some berries, it can be raspberries, blueberries, frozen blackberries, anything like that, and a little bit of nut butter or nuts or seeds, and then you've got literally everything that your muscles need to recover. This was actually the third example, is a real favourite of my daughters. They were national swimmers, so they'd always have Greek yogurt. This has got a higher protein content than regular yogurt, and mix that with some fruit and some nuts. So that's a really good post-training snack. Here are some more examples in front of you. So we've got anything, eggs, porridge is a good early post-exercise recovery food. I've got here, oh yes, these are some oat and chocolate chip cookies, not cookies, bars and bites that I made recently. So all of these things will be suitable after exercise. And here are some examples of suitable recovery meals that supply you with the carbs, the protein, and all of the vitamins and antioxidants that you need. So this is a 3-bean chili with rice. Here we've got granola with berries, milk or yogurt, so that's suitable after a morning session. Here we have got lentils with sweet potatoes and walnuts and lots of other colourful vegetables as well. And this is a stew. It's a handy one-pot dish, which is actually brilliant for parents to make in advance. So sort of bulk baking. I like the idea of sort of batch cooking and making larger quantities in advance. So you can either have a chicken stew or perhaps a chickpea stew. Tagine means stew with couscous, or it could be other types of grains such as rice or pasta. So finally, this is a little summary. Hopefully you've taken on board everything, but in case you've forgotten everything, here are the final pieces of advice. So firstly, your priority is to build a balanced diet according to your workout goals. So we talked about the athlete's plate as the model. Secondly, to ensure that you always fuel properly and ensure that you eat enough carbohydrates before and after training sessions. Thirdly, by timing your meals around your workouts, in other words, before, during and after, that can help to give you a competitive edge. Always prioritise your recovery, and that means following the 3 R's of rehydrate, refuel, and repair. And then you'll notice throughout this presentation, the emphasis was always on getting the right food rather than supplements. So it remains for me to say thank you very much for listening. And if you would like more information about sports nutrition, then you can visit my website. and there's free info. There's lots of articles on there. There are recipes on there as well. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, where I post all my new recipes, or you can buy one of my most recent books, which are in front of you there. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to go away from, I'm going to go back. Here we go, where am I? Share.
Anita, that was amazing. Thank you very much.
Great. Okay. Well, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I saw there were I think 2 questions in the chat. If you want to take those on board, and guys, if anybody else has jotted anything down or whatever, yeah, we'll go through those first 2 questions, and then we'll see if there's any others.
Okay, all right, so I'll take the questions in order. So the first question was, or is, how long before exercise should you eat your pre-workout meal? Okay, so just to reiterate the advice from my presentation, so the ideal time is about 2, 3 or 4 hours. It will really depend though on the practical constraints. So essentially you want to be feeling, you don't want to be feeling hungry, so you don't want to be feeling empty, but at the same time, you don't want to be feeling full. So you should essentially just manipulate the size of your meal according to the time that you've got available. So if you've got barely any time, it will be, you know, say you've got 30 minutes, it'll be just a small snack, a very small amount of food. Next question was squash or juice, or is either okay? Both would be fine. It really depends on personal preference. So if you want to make your own sports drink, I would recommend diluting squash, roughly a 1 in 6 dilution. That will give you the right amount of carbohydrate to optimize the absorption of water. You can, if you know that you'll be sweating heavily, so probably not in this weather, but in the summer, if your sweat losses are very high and you're doing a long session, then you can add about a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And that way you won't need to spend out on Lucozade or any of these other expensive sports drinks.
Anita, sorry, can you just go through the relevance of the salt so they understand why the salt is important?
Yeah, sorry, that's a very good question. So the point of adding salt is simply to replenish the electrolytes, and the main one here is sodium that you might be sweating out. So small amounts of sodium losses are fine. Your body will be, you will continue to be able to exercise and remain perfectly healthy. But if your losses are excessive, so if you're sweating very profusely and therefore your sodium losses will be very, very high, then that can have a detrimental effect on your performance, and also it will affect the ability of the body to sort of maintain homeostasis. But you don't need to be having salt tablets and electrolyte tablets for most of the triathlon events that you're doing at this stage in your triathlon career. But I don't know if James has got any further.
It's not as relevant for this age group because they don't go as long, but for some of your parents who maybe participate in triathlon, guys, don't get them to buy these expensive salt tablets. Just use a little bit of rock salt or sea salt. It works just as good, if not better.
Thanks, James. I was going to come on to ask that because all the marketing's about, oh, you don't just need sodium, you need potassium, magnesium, you know, you think that's just another expensive way.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a huge amount of marketing. The vast majority of it is hyped. So I think it's fine if you are an elite triathlete, particularly, you know, for if you're doing Ironmans and beyond and in hot conditions. But at the end of the day, when it comes to electrolyte replacement, it's essentially sodium that your body wants, and you can get that from sodium chloride that costs next to nothing from supermarkets. So you don't need to be buying all these expensive flavored versions. They won't do you any harm. It just depends whether you want to be spending a lot of money or not. So
I think most triathletes like to spend money because it makes them go faster. If the more they spend, the faster they go.
That is perfect advice, and I wholeheartedly agree with you, James, and I'm glad that you're giving out that sort of advice. Yeah, so I'm just looking, okay, just a very finally, just to finish off that question, you said juice. So if you wanted to make your own juice-based sports drink, you simply need to dilute juice, and it can be something like apple juice or pineapple juice, half and half with water, and that will give you a 6% solution that optimizes water absorption through the gut. So that's perfectly okay, but it's down to personal preference, really.
So Anita, just a quick one on that. So even that 6%, you still get that, the osmosis, etc. The way the body, it's not going to dehydrate you at all. It's still going to work as a hydrating solution as well.
Yes, absolutely. If you were to go over, so you had pure fruit juice or a very concentrated, say, or Coke or something like that, lemonade, straight lemonade, the concentration of those drinks is around about 10 to 12%. So it's what we call hypertonic, and that can actually slow down stomach emptying and slow down the absorption of water. So, you know, you're just getting very delayed water replenishment, and that's the last thing that you want to do when you're exercising or competing. Okay, shall I just go on to the next question, which was about stitches? Okay, yeah, so this is actually a very common concern from athletes. If you suffer from a stitch, what is the best thing to eat before a race? Okay, so I can't give you a magic answer to this, I'm afraid. So all the research shows that you know, the notion of stitch being related to dehydration is no longer borne out by the research. We used to think, oh, stitch is due to, you know, inadequate drinking or perhaps a lack of salt, but that's not the case at all. It seems to be more to do with I can't remember what it's called now, is it neuromuscular fatigue or something? James might be able to help me out there on the actual sciencey bit, but it's something that certain individuals are more prone to, but it's also more common in people who would perhaps set off on a workout or a race at a very fast pace. So certainly by building up your intensity more gradually, the body is then able to cope a bit better. And then perhaps
my take on a stitch is the stuff that I've read. It's not proven what causes the stitch. It's very much an individual thing, and you might get it at the top left of your chest, you might get it at the lower bottom part of your stomach. So it could be anywhere. And my only advice to people when they get stitches is to breathe deeper and lift your rib cage off your internal organs, and that seems to help.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, that's exactly concurs with what I've read about stitches as well. So the breathing, perhaps lowering of the intensity, or perhaps a very brief stretch of the affected area seems to be the best way of helping. Good. Okay. Any more questions?
Anything at all, guys?
I've got loads, but there is one thing I think relevant. I see so many, and it's the during a session or during training fueling and the timing of it, rather than waiting until you go into an energy debt, because things don't happen instantly when you eat. I've seen so many people in our sport as well taking energy gels 5 minutes before a 15-minute race. You know, the worth of that, and certainly when you're in a session, the timing of whatever your food is to keep you going.
Yeah, exactly. On average, it takes 15 to 30 minutes for the carbs to begin to get absorbed. And I suppose the value of having a small amount of carbohydrate prior to a race is not that it'll give you that instant energy, as you rightly point out, but it may give you energy in about 30 minutes time. And then obviously during an event, if you are, you know, you're refueling roughly every 30 minutes, you've got to allow for the fact that it takes about another 30 minutes for the body to actually the muscles to make use of that carbohydrate. So you're absolutely right. You don't want to wait until you experience fatigue and you're exhausted and then you start consuming carbs. You need to be sort of ahead of the game, really. And the best way that young athletes can work that out is really through trial and experience. So try different strategies during your training session so that when you're in a race situation, you've got a fairly clear plan of what works for you individually. And it is a very individual thing.
Lovely, thank you.
So one of the things that stands out for me, guys, especially for this age group, and I know we're not going to pools at the moment, is this training in the morning and being sort of, not having a meal or not having breakfast before. Some people can, some people can't. And I think what we need to be careful with, especially because mostly we're going to swim in the morning, is when we do high intensity swimming on zero food or zero nutrition. And you just need to be a little bit careful of that. And when you do long, steady distance training, as Anita was pointing out earlier, that's cool. But maybe just have a little bit of fuel in your bag that you can jump out the pool and maybe have a snack on or whatever else, which is more psychological than it is physiological. But we don't want to be running out of fuel in those high intensity sessions. So that morning session, just try and find what works for you, which can be quite tough sometimes.
When I was I was poolside for many years, actually, whilst my daughters were swim training. You could always see the swimmers who hadn't fueled beforehand. So if they skipped breakfast and they were in the pool for 2 hours, and you could always see that the ones who hadn't consumed anything or very, very little, they were the ones who were literally flagging after an hour. And then the ones who had managed to eat something, or at least, fueled well the night before and then had a little bit to eat beforehand, they could last the 2-hour session. So it really does, you're right, James, it really does make a very big difference. Sometimes I go on the principle of something is better than nothing. So I know it's difficult first thing in the morning. You might not have time, you might have no appetite. And if that's you, then just check that you are fueling really well the night before, so that your body will have glycogen in your muscles. And then the purpose in the morning of having at least a little bit of something, even if it's some dried fruit or a bar or half a bar or something like that, or a couple of bites of banana, at least then you're raising your blood glucose levels. And if you're going to be doing a decent set in the pool, then that will just give you that edge.
And also your point about having that 6% solution of carbohydrate or juice or whatever in the bottle, that would work very well. If you don't feel like you can take on real food.
Yeah.
Great stuff. Guys, everyone happy? Any other questions? Good stuff. Awesome. Anita, thank you very much.
You're more than welcome. I hope that everyone found it helpful. And I know you've recorded the session. If you wanted me to send you the slides, James, I'm happy